Greetings and welcome to the latest edition of the Entheogenic Evolution podcast. As always, I am your host, Martin, and I'm happy to have you with me today. For this week's episode, I am joined by sound healer Shannon Brown, who is the organizer for an online event that is starting today and running for the next 4 days, January 23rd through 26th. And this is a free online event that features over 21 speakers and presenters with videos provided online every night for the next 4 days. And then there's even more options that Shannon's going to tell us about in this interview. But Shannon had asked me to be one of the presenters for this event, and I believe that my interview is going to be coming out tomorrow on the 24th. But it does start today. This is a free online event, but you do need to register for it. So I'm going to go ahead and give you that information right away. You can go to shannonbrownhealingarts.com/Martin, and that can get you registered for the event. And once you're registered, you can enjoy all of it for free. And Shannon's going to be telling us all about it, and I will have the link in the podcast notes so you can check that out and get yourself registered for this event. And of course, in this conversation, Shannon's going to tell us more about it, as well as her own entry into sound healing through psychedelic experience, and lots of great stuff to have here on the Entheogenic Evolution podcast. Before we get to that, just a couple quick announcements. As I mentioned last week, my personal webpage, which I've had for over 20 years now, has been having some problems. So I'm trying to transfer everything over to a brand new website and transfer the domain name, and all of that is taking a little bit of time. So my personal website, martinball.net, may still be down or not available when this podcast comes out. So I'm just inviting people to stop by at non-dualentheogenicintegration.com if you want to check me out online. And of course, you can go to the Entheogenic Evolution on YouTube to catch videos and interviews over there. But hopefully my personal webpage, martinball.net, will be up and fresh and new sometime very, very soon. And of course, I am always available for 30, 60, or 90-minute video consultation calls to help you integrate your entheogenic experience. And if you just want to talk about sound and music, I'm always up for that as well. And speaking of music, I do have some new music that I've released, and I've got a new track available for you guys at the end of this interview. And just to remind you, if you would like to support this podcast, it's quite easy. Stop by my Patreon page at patreon.com/MartinWBall. There is everything from $1 a month up to $100 a month, which also gets you a 1-hour monthly video call check-in with me. And there's no obligation. You can change it anytime. You can change your tiers, and there's increasing access and benefits and gifts as you move up the tier scale. But it's a great way to support this podcast and perhaps get something back in return. Okay, so I think that that's all the announcements that I have for today. I just want to go ahead and jump into this interview with Shannon for all of you guys to get you inspired to take part in the Sacred Sound Summit, which is starting today, this evening. This is coming out in the morning, and the event starts tonight and goes for 4 days. And then I think there's also going to be a weekend wrap-up that happens as well if you register and get access to all of those videos. So here's my conversation with Shannon. Hope you enjoy. Again, you can register at Shannon Brown, that's SHANNON, Brown, healingarts.com/Martin. And that is my registration link for you. Okay, here's my conversation with Shannon. Well, I am welcoming on to the Entheogenic Evolution podcast today, Shannon Brown. And Shannon is both the inspiration behind and the organizer of a brand new event that is taking place this week, which is the Sacred Sounds Summit. And we are here to talk all about it. So Shannon, welcome to the Entheogenic Evolution podcast.
Thank you so much, Martin. I'm so happy to be here and excited to share this fantastic presentation to all the viewers and all the people who are going to come and check it out.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to talk about it, and maybe I'll just start with a thank you. You invited me to participate in this summit and be one of the speakers, and it was an absolute pleasure to do that interview with you. Something I've said, here on my podcast and elsewhere is that music is like one of my primary loves in life. One time somebody asked me, like, if you could only do one thing, what would it be? And I really surprised them when I said, oh, that's super easy. It'd be music. But the pleasure of getting to talk about it with you was that while I've been interviewed many times over the course of my career, it's almost always to talk about 5-MeO-DMT, talk about psychedelics, talk about non-duality, talk about entheogenic education and facilitation, all of that, which is great. But I almost never get people asking me about music. I'm not really known as like musician. So it was just an absolute pleasure to have you invite me on just to talk about music, like the thing I love the most in the world. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Oh, you're so welcome. And yeah, well, part of the summit really is about that, how music can facilitate non-ordinary states of reality, and whether that's in a shamanic journey, or whether that's in a sound bath, or whether that's just you're having a bath yourself and you're listening
Yeah.
to some beautiful music, you know. But it's also in psychedelic work. Music is really foundational, and in modern, I'm sure we'll talk a lot about this, but in modern psychedelic work, there's a lot of listening to playlists, curated
Mhm.
playlists. And in the sort of modern evolution of it, people aren't being taught about live music necessarily, unless you're working with indigenous healers. So to talk to you about it in this context was really, really exciting. And I love your background in academia, and we were talking about the brain, and it just got super in depth. And so I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Oh yeah, it was so much fun for me, and really appreciated that opportunity, and hope that the audience enjoys my talk as well as the many others that you've got lined up for this event. So we're going to talk about several different things today in our conversation, but let's start with a little bit more about the Sacred Sound Summit. So we're actually recording this 2 weeks ahead of time, but this is being released on the morning of the start of the event. So we're just going to talk about it in the present tense because it's happening now. So yeah, tell us a little bit more about what this is and who's involved and how people can participate and join in and what's taking place with the Sacred Sound Summit.
Yeah, sure. So this is an online gathering. It's free for anyone who wants to join. And we're launching today, as it were. And so I've invited sound healers, vocal alchemists, leaders in ceremonial healing, visionaries, scientists, doctors, to talk about sound and kind of the foundation of this massive movement that's happening right now. Sound healing is gaining tremendous momentum, and it's, even though it's ancient, the idea of sound healing as a way of, as like an alternative practice basically for healing, it's relatively new. So it's being designed as we speak, right? And so what can happen with sound healing is we can awaken our internal selves with our voices. We can become instruments. We can elevate who we are as people through our vibration. And so this is all about learning what those foundations are in sound, and then working together as a community, as a global community, to bring all of that medicine basically into the world to help us to expand our consciousness and to heal and to transform and to ultimately support the awakening of the new world and the healing of the planet. That's really my hope for the summit. I know it's big, but I think it's possible.
Yeah, so what's the trajectory for the event itself? I know it's spanning over 4 days, so what can people expect if they've registered to participate in it?
Yeah. So if you've registered today, or at least June 23rd, at 7 p.m. today, they can tune into a live opening ceremony where I will be offering a live sound bath from a place in Toronto called the Unity Studio. And basically that's, opening the space and launching the summit. And I have some incredible speakers. I can't wait to tell you a bit about them. But throughout those 4 days, people can join the Facebook group. There'll be lots of opportunity to dialogue. I'm really inviting people to come in and introduce themselves and say how sound has affected their lives. A lot of people who will be joining us will be sound healers themselves or people who are interested in the ceremonial aspects of sound, people who are interested in, vibration and resonance and sacred geometry and, even Egyptian hieroglyphics. This amazing scientist named John Stuart Reid is talking about his time in Egypt and how he was able to sing in the king's chamber and then create hieroglyphics out of sand. So he goes into this like really cool stuff. And then on the last day, on the 26th, there'll be kind of like an integration session. So I'll do a mini sound bath, and then we'll talk, and I'll invite people to really integrate what they've gone through the experience. So it's those 4 days, and there will be some replays as well. So if you can't make it a day, or if there's a lot to tune into, so there are opportunities for you to watch these videos and to listen further into the week. Yeah.
Great. Well, we're going to come back and we'll talk more about some of the different presenters and what's going on with the event. I do want to pivot into giving you the opportunity to share more about yourself, but I will say for the audience, this is it's a free event, but you do need to register in order to participate. So you go to shannonbrownhealingarts.com and you can use /Martin if you want to use my link to register. It doesn't really matter, but the point is that you do need to register so that you get access to the live events and also the recorded videos. So it's free, but you got to register. So you're not just going to be able to go look at it online without doing a little action on your part. So I just want to encourage people to go ahead and do that. As we've discussed, this is coming out Monday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific time, but the event doesn't start until 7. So you've got time today. And if you're catching this maybe a little bit later in the week, then there's still time that you could register and participate in this event.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's basically like a school, from all the work that I've been doing and all the interviews that I've been doing, I've been learning so much. I thought I knew a lot, but I'm learning so much, and it feels like a beautiful space of receiving so much deep and ancient knowledge and information. And of course, I do also have an academic background like you. I really get into, the nitty gritty, like science of it all as well. I'm kind of nerdy that way. So our conversation, I've listened to it again, and I just was like, wow, I love this. I loved what we talked about.
Yeah, well, that's one of the fun things of being someone who either organizes events or does podcasts like this is that you get to talk to really interesting people and learn really interesting stuff. And it's a fun excuse to like, oh, I want to learn more about this. So I'm going to find somebody that I can interview that's going to tell me more about this topic. And then we get to learn and we get to share it with our audience. And, education, it's a great thing. And sharing of expertise, I think, is just a beautiful thing. And always like to encourage anything that helps educate people about stuff from people who really know what they're talking about and know what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So Shannon, let's talk a little bit more about you. I'd like to invite you to kind of tell your story, share your background with us, and then how you got into this topic of sound and sound healing and the idea of sacred sounds and the importance of sound and vocalization and music and vibing in and all of that good stuff that comes with music and sound.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm a creative being, always have been. My parents were artists. They met at art school in the 60s. It was like, in Toronto at the Ontario College of Art, where things were just starting to get really wild. And so I was born into, in the early 70s, into like a lot of wildness and creativity. And so I was always raised with this understanding that art and creativity was a good thing and that we should express ourselves creatively. But as I got through school, I started to notice that that wasn't what was being supported in schools.
Yeah.
And especially when I got into the later years, it became super challenging. I found my people when I was a teenager. When I was 14, I joined a school of performing arts in Calgary, Alberta, and it was called the Young Canadian School of the Performing Arts. So it was this amazing group of young people who had been doing this work since the 60s, performing at the Calgary Stampede. So the Calgary Stampede is this big thing, and at the end of the chuck wagon races, they would have like a Las Vegas style show. So I just thought this was the coolest thing. We got to perform in front of 30,000 people. We got to sing and dance. We recorded our music. We had special guests come in and teach us how to sing and dance. So I got this great foundation of performance and, how to project myself into the world. And so I always loved music. I always loved dance. But my father was a painter. So I really wanted to please my father and, indulge in my desire to be an artist as well. So when I got to university, I had the choice of either going into fine arts or into music. And in the end, I went into fine arts. So I spent many, many years painting and putting on art exhibitions and being an artist, and then getting into arts administration, and kind of as I got older, I started shying away from being an artist, and I started to become more of an administrator, which probably there's people out there who know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Because it can be scary. Like living the life of an artist, it can get pretty serious, if you're not making the money that you need to live. And our world really does not support the arts as a living wage.
No.
People who artists are always called upon to offer free things in exchange for exposure. That's BS. Don't ever do that, people. The arts are legitimate. And so I started to teach art. I was working in museums, and I was really loving art and doing a lot of organization. And what we need to remember is that everything that's happened in the past is lining you up for what is actually meant to happen, right? So keeping in mind all this foundational work I was doing, I was a film producer for 10 years. I was doing all this constructive work, how to create spaces, how to have a spreadsheet and do budgeting and that sort of stuff. And so I got to this point, though, because I started realizing that the arts were innately healing. I had students come up to me and they were breaking down when they were talking about singing, or when they were talking about painting. They were having these moments where I think it's because you end up touching into the deeper aspects of self with creativity and with art. So I was going into schools and teaching, and these kids were coming to me. So I started to take psychology and to try and understand what was going on. And so I had this healing aspect going on with me. I had the arts, but I was still working for the man, basically.
Yeah.
And so around 2017, I went to Peru and took ayahuasca. And I had done it a couple of times prior to that. But during the ceremony, I had prayed, how can I bring my art into the world and make a living? And at that moment, I was visited by birds, and they came and they landed on me, and I started to actually grow a beak myself. And I was told by the birds, you are meant to bring your singing into the world. And I was like, whoa, what? And this beautiful song of the birds started to flow through me, and I started to sing, and the shamans were encouraging me to sing. And it really was my wake-up call. And basically, the medicine said to me, you're ready. If you want to live your life as an artist, as a musician, as a healer, the time is now. So I ended up heading back to my home in Canada, and I ended up doing it, but not in earnest. I took a couple more years at the university I was working at. I was working at an art museum, but I started to do it on the side. And then finally COVID hit, and it was like, bam, I handed in my letter. And that was it. And honestly, the world has welcomed me, and it feels so good to be standing in my truth. And that's always been what I've wanted to share with people, is how to become your true self. And creativity and the arts and music and healing is the most powerful way to really access who we are and what we're here to do.
Oh, that's great. Sorry, I just got a ding there. I hope that didn't come through. I forgot to put my do not disturb on. But I appreciate you sharing that sometimes it can be a very long process for people, and kind of encountering the internal creative urge and then finding a place for well, where is this going to fit? And as you say, that so much of the education process and program just doesn't really support it. And I'm reminded of years ago, I taught English as a second language for international students. And one of the things that we used to do is we would have English through music. And so what I would do is I'd bring in music, and then we'd end up having conversations about it and talking about it and just using English. And sometimes the students kind of complained about it. But there was a study, and I don't have the reference for the study. I don't know where it was done, or can't give you any of the names or the title of the study. But it was looking at the study of a foreign language. And it took two groups of students. One group did something like an hour of language study 5 days a week in school. And then another group did language study 2 days a week of 1 hour, and then had music class where they listened to music and talked about music and maybe even played music. And that group actually performed better than the group that was studying language every day. And I just thought that was very revealing, that it shows about participation in music and creativity, that it's doing something to our brains. And I think there's also been studies that have been done that have looked at how certain parts of the brain of musicians are more active than non-musicians. So these activities that we participate in, they have a direct impact on our neurophysiology and perhaps have very beneficial effects, let alone the healing properties of sound, the way that we are able to entrain with different states of consciousness through sound, and how that can impact our perception and experience of our health and well-being. I mean, there's so much there. And I think it's just such an interesting area. But yeah, the creativity is not really allowed in either the modern marketplace, where, as you say, a lot of artists and musicians are expected to do things for free. I mean, I used to play out for First Friday events. I haven't done it since COVID here in Ashland, but that was always a thing, is like, come and play your music, and then you get to promote yourself, and it's for free. And I didn't mind doing that because I wasn't doing anything else anyway. But it's so ingrained within culture that, oh, you get to display your art, and so you get to promote, but there's no monetary compensation for you. You can play music, but there's no monetary compensation. So it makes it hard for people to actually make a living doing this creative stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting what you're saying about teaching language through music, because I also have an education degree from Queen's University, and in teaching art. There's so much science right now about what you're saying, that all subjects can be taught through the arts. Just think of math. Think of the geometries of math. That is visual. Think of dance. We can create geometries with dance as well.
Yeah.
Think of history. We could do plays around history. Like, everything that we are taught can be learned through the arts. And it's also a very somatic experience. Even just making music is a somatic experience. And I loved what you said about, more regions of the brain are lighting up. Unfortunately, it's the conversation is challenging, because why do we have to say to the people in charge, if you let kids make art, they're going to be better at math? Like,
Yeah.
Why can't it just be, we're going to be better humans?
Yeah.
With the arts, because actually humans have been making art since the beginning of time. Like, how do we know about history? Go to the caves and look at the cave art. It's like, that's who we are as humans. We are creators. We are musical. We are physical, dancers, movers, creators, visionaries. We want to express what we see in the world through some sort of creative expression. That's the job of the artist, is to reflect back what is being seen and experienced at a time and show it to the world in this creative way, right? Like, look at cartoonists.
Yeah.
Right now. People are having such fun with what's going on. Like, even though it's terrifying, we've got to get some humor in here, because how else are we going to survive this, right?
Yeah. And I really want to second that point that you just made, that creative expression is such a fundamental part of being human. And it's been with humanity, as you say, since the beginning. We first started making music and making art and expressing ourselves through dance and body decoration, that this is a fundamental factor of the human experience, and that it's so neglected and so often dismissed and just not cultivated for people, and just giving that opportunity to be an expressive individual and to be creative and to find what excites us internally and how can I manifest that at the exterior level and share that with others and share my inner experience and reflect on the world in that way. It's so integral to who we are. But, we focus on, learn your math, learn your language, learn your skills, get a job, make your money. And then we don't really support the arts and music. And the internet is such a double-edged sword there, where it gives people the opportunity to create more work and share their work and promote their work. But then the expectation is always, well, it's for free. And people use your art or use your music, and maybe you get credit, maybe you don't. So it allows for more sharing, but it doesn't necessarily allow for people to really find a way to sustain themselves with that. And I don't even know where we currently are in the United States on arts funding or music funding, but it's probably almost non-existent, given the way that everything's been slashed, even medical science and research. So I don't have high hopes for that. And with Trump taking over the Kennedy Center, I mean, talk about absurd. Anyway, that's a different issue. But using art, music, and creativity to respond to the events around us, I think, is also very important, because it allows us an outlet to express ourselves. Mm-hmm. And that's also something that's very much being shut down in this country right now. The idea that you can only express yourself within a very limited confine of what's acceptable, and everything else is improper ideology or whatever the fuck they want to say it is. But anyway, just the reality we're living in.
That's right. That's right. I would love to share just what you were talking about in terms of being artists since the beginning of time. When I first started studying art therapy, one of the scientists that we were presented with was a woman named Ellen Dissanecki, and she has this theory called Homo aestheticus. So basically, this is our ancestors who took care of the tools that they made and took time with the tools and painted them and decorated them. Those tools lasted and worked better. And therefore, the people who made those, who were the artists and the craftspeople, those people survived. So those are our ancestors. Our ancestors are the Homo aestheticus. So inside of all of us, we have those capacities to be creative and to want to take care of our things and make things. She called it making things special. So that's that's one aspect of it. But I'd love to jump into the kind of community aspect of it as well, and how that could come around to psychedelics in an interesting way.
Oh yeah, go right ahead. You open the door. Let's walk through it.
Yeah. Well, as you were speaking, I was kind of thinking about that, because you did say, how we've been coming together and dancing, and this is the way of community. I'm sure you have. I know I spent years raving, going dancing, going to clubs, and training to the music with my friends. And in one particular experience, looking up at this amazing DJ, I can't remember her name. It was something like Lioness, and she had these dreadlocks, and we were out in Nelson, British Columbia, and she was playing this amazing music, and everybody was dancing. And I looked around, and it was like we were all bees in a hive. We were everybody was buzzing together, and nobody was banging into each other. It was like we were all in this I can't remember the term of it, when you see birds flocking together. It's that
murmuration. Yeah,
murmuration. That's right. And we were in training together, and we were all dancing. And I looked around. I was like, we're all just like bees in the hive, moving together. And so we have that capacity as humans to move in these ways that bring us into this oneness, right? And so. And that's something that we've done since the beginning of time. All cultures have these moments of community gathering, and they often happen at times of celebration or times of ritual or times of mourning, times of wedding, funeral, birth, all these important times in our lives. That's when people will come together and celebrate through these experiences of shared movement and shared deep understanding without words, without talking necessarily,
Yeah.
just with our creativity.
Yeah. So going back to that experience you had in Peru with the birds coming and kind of that invitation gets open, like you can start to share this if you want. I'd love to hear a little bit more about then your process of bringing that out. So you said that with COVID, you send in your resignation, like, okay, I'm done, and you've been creating this. But let's hear a bit more about what that means for you and what kind of community you serve, and how that also functions for you as a creative and expressive individual. Like, tell us more about what you are offering. And you said that you've been well received there. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about what is the community that has received you and welcomed that in. And yeah.
Yeah, sure. I'd love that. So I live in a part-time. I live in a place called Kingston, Ontario. And here in Kingston, we've got a pretty vibrant psychedelic society, and Queen's University has a psychedelic center, like a lab. There's a lot of research going on here. And so I found that there was a community already in place, and it was suggested that if I wanted to take this further and to start working in the psychedelic realm, that I could study with the Center for Medicinal Mindfulness out of Colorado. Daniel McQueen at that time was running mindfulness-based cannabis guiding program to train people who didn't have licensure as therapists or psychotherapists. People could have those licenses, but you could also come from other backgrounds. So that was like a little bug that was put in my hat. And I was thinking about this, and I was thinking I would like to continue doing this more therapeutic work with the arts in sort of like art therapy or expressive arts, but start to get some training with psychedelics and become a psychedelic guide. I had spent years working with people in this therapeutic way, also had shamanic training, so I knew about working with energy. And alongside that, I started to do my sound therapy training. So really getting to the depths of what is sound therapy and how can it be therapeutic. And when I first started doing the training with the Center for Medicinal Mindfulness, really it was about working with psychedelic cannabis. So I'd love to jump into that a little bit.
Yeah.
And then working with it in a therapeutic way, either with individuals or groups, and using a playlist. So this was the training that I received. But at the time, I was sort of thinking, well, can I do this with sound therapy? And will that come together? Will that mix? Because obviously I'd been sitting with ayahuasca and really, really loving the whole experience of community building that was happening with ayahuasca. It's rarely is ayahuasca served one-on-one.
Yeah.
Most of the time it's served in a communal experience. And so when COVID hit, I was supposed to go to Peru again, and I had a ticket that I had to exchange because nobody was really being allowed into Peru at the time. And I have always loved Mexico. So I decided to go to Mexico during COVID. And when I got there, woo, my life changed drastically because I realized that in Mexico, people were there. It was a different vibe. I was in an area called Playa del Carmen. It's close to Tulum. There were people from all over the world there because Mexico was not, it didn't mandate that you had a vaccine. So there were people coming from all over the place. Plus, Mexico has a foundational open welcome to anyone from any country is allowed to come to Mexico. They don't say no to people, and you can stay there for long periods of time. So COVID hit. I jumped on a plane, went to Mexico, had a friend there who was working with ayahuasca, and she introduced me to this community. So basically, that became my reality. And I was training with the Center for Medicinal Mindfulness, learning how to do online psychedelic psychotherapy with cannabis. and in person as well. So I basically taught myself how to incorporate cannabis work with sound healing and the shamanic work that I do. So I was setting up ceremonies at my house there and bringing in, 1 to 6 or 7 people at a time coming to these, I call them Cannabliss sound ceremony. And that really started it off for me, doing my own personal work with ayahuasca, with the community in Mexico, working a little bit with other medicines like 5-MeO, a little bit of mushroom work as well, but really focusing on cannabis and the incredible, beautiful, transformative experiences of cannabis guiding. It was very powerful to see the deep healing people were going through with this medicine. So yeah, so that's a little bit about what I do in this realm, and really, sound is just it's such an incredible foundation with psychedelics. In fact, it's very rare that people will have a psychedelic journey without some sort of sound. We talked about that in your
Yeah.
interview, right?
Yeah. That in my opinion, things got taken off course a little bit with Terence McKenna's insistence that you should do 5 grams of mushrooms alone in the dark and in silence. And my response to that has always been, when we look at indigenous cultures around the world that have used psychedelics, it's always with music. I mean, there's no such thing as like a completely silent psychedelic ceremony. It just, there might be moments and time periods of silence for contemplation and meditation and things like that. But music is one of the main ingredients, and the idea that you would trip for 6 hours alone in the dark with like no music is just, it's a really alien concept to the world of psychedelics. And I'm not sure if people in the West have really absorbed that knowledge yet, but I also think it's just a match made in heaven that sound baths and sound healing and creative arts and expression of music and dance, that they're so readily incorporated into psychedelic culture because it's been that way forever. And yeah, we kind of lost sight of it with this sort of this lone wolf, sort of this heroic idea of, I'm going to suffer alone in darkness and silence no matter what, versus I'm going to work with others. I'm going to give expression via song and dance and movement. But there's so much within the psychedelic world that is the incorporation of music. And you mentioned cannabis. I mean, jazz, blues, rock and roll, reggae, ska, and then the later development of like electronic music through things like MDMA, and just cannabis has been a part of like the music scene forever. And there's a reason
Yes.
for that, because it
Yes.
goes really well together. And I think we probably talked about how when I was like 15 and I first started playing music, that there was a older student at my high school who invited me over to like get high and play music and smoke some cannabis. And, he was a couple years older than me, and he's like, well, as musicians and artists, it's our duty to take mind-altering drugs and then give our creativity to the world. And I was like, sounds cool to me, because man,
Oh my God, I love that.
I'm really enjoying getting high and making music is just it's so much fun, and it helps us overcome our inhibitions. It helps us really, when you get in the vibe and you start doing weird stuff, like maybe you're making bird songs or bird calls, but there's that internal sense of permission, like this is fun, this is cool, I don't know where this is going. So it kind of just takes the lid off of it, and it's just, oh, it's beautiful. Like as a musician, I always used to smoke cannabis whenever I was recording music. Now that changed with like the birth of my kids and all of that. Whereas, okay, cannabis comes at the end of the day. So now I don't get high before I make music, but I always look forward to, okay, I recorded a new track today. So later on tonight, I'm going to get out my vape pen and then I'm going to listen to my song. And it's always a novel experience, because now I'm really feeling it, really getting it. And it's just, for me, it's like they just go together. It's like chocolate and peanut butter. Like, why would you want one without the other? When you can have them both.
Yeah. Oh, I love what you're saying. It's so true. I've been in multiple bands in my life. I was the lead singer in a number of bands, like in high school and then in later years as well. And there's nothing like that feeling of flow that you get into when you're making music. And of
Yeah.
course, that can be without cannabis. But if you're smoking altogether, it's really quite an exquisite feeling. Yeah. So
Yeah.
when you were describing that, I totally agree. And I agree with your friends that it's our duty to do this as
Yeah.
artists.
Yeah. And it kind of goes back to that image you mentioned of like the murmuration of birds, right? And the studies have shown that each bird only needs to keep track of like the 3 to 7 nearest birds, and then they all move together. And the schools of fish do the same thing.
Yeah.
And that through our inhibitions, through our resistances, through our barriers, our boundaries, that it can be hard for people to find like where do I fit within the flow state of others. And that's where music in and of itself allows us to transcend those barriers and move into that more communal experience. And then if we're adding some psychedelics or some cannabis, which I also consider to be a psychedelic in its own way, if we add that into the mix, it just allows for greater receptivity and interconnectivity. And we all know now that it's actually opening up neural pathways. It allows for mirror neurons, right? Where we literally are able to vibe in with each other, and it just amplifies and enhances that. And so it's just a natural marriage. So you mentioned being in bands in high school. I'm just curious if you'd like to share with us what is your own personal history of music interest? In other words, like, where did you start yourself, like, listening to music, enjoying music? How did you identify? Like many of us creative types, we go through like different phases of, I'm into this music and this style and this music. So I'm just curious what that would be for you, if you could share that, and
Yeah.
even
I
bring
love
it up
that
to where you are
question.
now. Like, what do you like to listen to? What do you like to
Okay.
play?
Yeah. Well, when I was a kid, like my parents divorced when I was a kid, and I used to have a lot of babysitters, so they would come over and play music. And there in Canada, there was this record label called K-Tel Records, and K-Tel Records were these. There were albums that had multiple songs from different musicians,
Mm.
and so there was like this one album called Kooky Funky Hits, and it had songs like yeah. So there's like the foundation of who I am: kooky and funky hits. So like one of the songs was Monster Mash, like just
Oh
stuff
yeah.
like that, like weird but like danceable. And so that type of music and like blues and funk and James Brown and that sort of music from my childhood was always really present. And my mom, she used to play albums when I woke up and when I went to sleep. So there was always music in my house. In the 70s, my mom played a lot of like female musicians like Janice Ian and Joni Mitchell and that sort of music. So I grew up with all these women singers as well. So I had my babysitters playing the K-Tel stuff, my mom doing that. I used to love listening to the radio. And I was loving music when I was in school. Anytime we had music class, I was always digging that. And so I guess when I was in high school, I probably was listening to like whatever mixtapes like my boyfriends were giving me.
Yeah.
So that was always something, typical of like the 80s.
Yeah.
And then I guess what else could I mention? Yeah, so when I went to university, I had already done this stint in the Young Canadians of the Calgary Stampede, this School of Performing Arts, and so I already like was a great singer, and so I found out about this band, and we basically were writing original songs, but we were also playing some Beatles, some Janis Joplin, Jefferson Starship, stuff like that, like really kind of expansive music that really showcased my voice. So I was really lucky to be with this group of really awesome musicians, and also started writing songs as well. So, but I also had time hanging out with this guy who was really into electronic music, like back in the 90s.
Mm.
And so we were, and this other boyfriend who also liked Grateful Dead. So I have quite an expansive background in history and current love of music. So yeah, we would smoke a lot of cannabis and listen to music, and probably there was sex mixed into there as well, because cannabis and sex is always really
Yeah.
fun. Cannabis music and sex is even better. So yeah, like I've always been interested in going out and seeing bands, going to clubs and dancing. And then back in, let's see, when did I start? 2010, I suppose. No, 2014, somewhere around there. I actually started running an electronic music festival here in Kingston.
Mm.
I did that for 5 years with a group of collaborators, a group of really awesome folks here in Kingston. And it was great because I love dancing, and I couldn't find any places in Kingston that were playing good music. So this group of women and I, we decided to apply for some grants. And in Canada, the arts have a lot of funding from the government. So we got financial support, and we were able to bring electronic music from across Canada, electronic music DJs from across Canada to Kingston to put on this big electronic music festival. And at the time, I started going to other electronic music festivals. I went to Burning Man, Quebec, which is near where I live. There's a lot of great festivals there, like a lot of kind of psytrance festivals there, which at the time, at the beginning, I was like, who would listen to psytrance? But then as I got more into psychedelics, I kind of understood the psytrance aspect, the sort of super fast beats per minute and the
Yeah.
shamanic journeying that you can have with that type of music. So I'm certainly a fan of digital music. I'm certainly a fan of electronic music, and I'm also love people like Parengi. He's one of my favorite musicians, who mixes live music, looping, shamanic instruments, voice. And I would say that that's kind of where my music is going these days. And I have a 19-year-old daughter who has been introducing me to all of her music, and she's really loving a lot of my music from my earlier days. The other day we were in the car, and she was like, "Do you know the Sundays?" And I was like, "Yeah, the Sundays were big when I was in my
Yeah.
20s." And so we started listening to the Sundays. So it's actually pretty nice to well, I appreciate music so much, and I love that. I just love music. I love sound and music, and I love that I can share that with the world and share that with my daughter and share that with you now.
Yeah. Well, it's nice hearing all of that. And I appreciate the diversity that you're referencing in your own musical loves. And I can certainly identify with that. I'm fairly eclectic in the music
Hmm.
that I like to listen to. And I appreciate my own journey and growth. We don't need to get into my story because this is your interview, but yeah, it's just thinking again about how music is just such a huge part of my life, my identity, my experience, and I love having a soundtrack for like every day. I mean, I'm listening to music like all the time,
Uh-huh.
all the time. You know, is it
Yeah.
the only time I'm not listening to music is when I am doing an interview or recording my own music. Other than that, I've got music going and just love it. Absolutely love
Hmm.
it. I wonder if we could go back a little bit and talk a little bit more about the idea of psychedelic cannabis sessions and then how music and sound healing gets incorporated there. So kind of referencing back a little bit about the work he did with Daniel McQueen. And for the listening audience, I do believe that my interview with Daniel McQueen is still up on my podcast. I think we talked a couple years ago, and I think we were talking about cannabis and sexuality, but I believe that interview is still available here on the podcast. So he's been featured here. But yeah, anything you'd like to share along those lines? And maybe even we can just start with the idea of like, what is, quote, psychedelic cannabis? Because I know a lot of people it's like, oh, well, cannabis is cannabis. It's not really a psychedelic. I disagree. But how would you explain that from your perspective and your educational experience?
Yeah, sure. So psychedelic cannabis is it's in some ways it's how you work with the cannabis that makes it psychedelic. And most people are used to smoking a joint and going about their business, like smoking a joint and going dancing, or smoking a joint and recording their music, or smoking a joint or going for a walk in the forest. So in the psychedelic context, it's kind of what you think it would be. It's laying back, getting really comfortable and relaxed, putting on eye shades, and then listening to music and being guided by somebody. So in that safe space which is created, you're basically replicating what is done in a lot of psychedelic experiences. It's tuning into the moment. It's tuning into the somatic and the visual, as we would with any psychedelic journey, becoming very attuned, right? And so probably you've talked to Daniel about this, but what I would say to anyone who might want to experience a psychedelic cannabis journey, cannabis comes in two different strains. I mean, there's different types of cannabis and there's different chemical compounds in cannabis. There's also terpenes. The terpenes are things like the smell. It's kind of like when you drink wine, you can smell earthy, you can smell oak, you can smell, daisy. Well, it's the same with cannabis. You can smell lemon. Limonene is a terpene. You can smell lavender. You can smell rose. And you can smell moss. So each of these terpenes gives a different subtle effect to it. So what we would do is we would work with the indica strain and the sativa strain. So for any of you out there, you know a lot about cannabis, you know where I'm going with this. Basically, indica is the very deeply relaxing and somatic strain. And you can remember it because I'll tell you, indica sounds like into couch. So when you're into couch, you are super relaxed and you don't want to get up. So think of a third of what we're smoking is the indica. The other third that we smoke is the sativa. The sativa is the creative. The sativa is the journeying, the visionary, the expansive, the new ideas, the making links, the psyche accessing. And so when you mix those two, you can get a hybrid. So we're going to work with like a third indica, a third sativa, and a third hybrid. The indica works on the lower chakras, the lower three. The sativa works on the top three, and the hybrid works in the heart. So you've got this beautiful synergistic building together of all the best qualities of cannabis. Now, some people might say, oh, cannabis makes me really paranoid. Well, you put in the indica, and what does it do? It relaxes the body. Well, what is the brain? The brain is the body. So the indica relaxes the brain. When somebody has the sativa, they may say, I don't want to be stuck on the couch. I went to a party once and I had indica and I couldn't get up and I was actually drooling. Side note, that happened to me once. Don't do indica edibles at a party. So you've got the best of both, and they kind of mix together to bring out all these beautiful qualities. So the beauty of working with cannabis, there's a lot of things. It's very somatic. It allows you to relax in the most profound way. So imagine you're just laying there and you're surrendering to the feeling of the indica in your body, which allows you to get super deeply relaxed and somatically aware. And then as you're laying there and you're letting yourself become very relaxed, some people might start to shake, and you see people having like very deep and profound nervous system reset experiences, because our nervous systems are all messed up these days. We're just all so stressed. I mean, obviously not everybody. Many people are doing their practices and doing a good job at staying healthy and grounded, but all of us at some point could use some nervous system reset. So you go into this very relaxed state, you allow your body to reset. Sometimes people might shake. They might express shots of energy through their body. I've seen people in my cannabis ceremonies who are like, it's like they're riding a horse. They're like shaking so much. Now, most people if you're just smoking a joint and going for a walk, you're not going to experience that, right? But when you're allowing the medicine to do its work, to work with us, as cannabis has been with us since the beginning of time. Cannabis has evolved with us as humans. We have the endocannabinoid system in our bodies to receive cannabis. So imagine you're super deeply relaxed, and then what can happen is the mind can start to expand and open to vistas, to entities, to beings, to new ideas, to visions, where you can, like any psychedelic, you've asked your question, you've had your intention statement, which can guide you. So you've asked your question. Now you can start to receive visions. So your body is relaxed and your mind starts to open and you can journey. And that's where the sound comes in. The sound, we know that sound healing brings us into the hypnagogic state. It allows our brains to entrain with the music to take us to the frequencies of the dreaming, not full dreaming, not full awakening, but that moment in between awakening and sleeping. That's called the hypnagogic. That's the place of visions. That's the place of dreaming where we can answer questions, right? It's more like almost like lucid dreaming. It's a space where we can go on journeys. And if you're at all familiar with shamanic work, you may have a being come and show up. You can ask that being, are you here for my highest good? Do you have information for me? And you may be surprised that those beings will start to talk to you and share information with you. Now, whether those are actual beings from other dimensions, this is the foundational question in psychedelics. Are they from other dimensions, or are they just our psyche starting to bring up unconscious material from our, unconscious? I personally believe that it's a mix. Like there's the genetic imprints of our ancestors within us that maybe our ancestors will talk to us, or there's the potential of beings from other dimensions coming to visit us and work on us, like ayahuasca beings who will come and work on our DNA and that sort of thing. This is possible with cannabis. And the way to get there is through the set and setting and the psychedelic deep knowing that it is psychedelic, the buy-in as well. I know 100% that this works. And so when I work with people, they know that I'm invested and I know it's going to work. And therefore, I rarely have anyone come to me saying, oh, that didn't work. Especially because people, like in general, most people know what cannabis is. Like you've already got buy-in from people because they've done it before, right? So that's kind of just a taste of what happens, because there's a lot I could talk about with the sound healing aspect, but that's a little bit to start with.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Shannon. And of course, the music, the sounds, the vibrations, it provides input that we both hear and we feel in the body, and it engages us intellectually and also emotionally. I mean, there's just so much that music provides in that sense. It can also trigger memories. It can trigger experiences. And one of the things that I love about music and sound in conjunction with any kind of psychedelic work, whether it's cannabis or, going all the way up to 5-MeO, is that often people will pass through periods where the ego is uncomfortable or agitated, or the mind doesn't know what to do. And just my fallback for everyone is always, when you don't know what to do nothing and listen to the music. It's so simple. That's all you need to do.
Yep.
And then you relax into the next layer of the experience. But if we don't have music, that's when people tend to get more agitated, where that egoic desire to be in control and to manage and to direct things, it doesn't, music soothes the savage beast, right? So it doesn't have that background ambiance to fall back into. And so then people get like, oh, I'm shaking, I've got to do something about it, so now I got to get up and leave, versus I'm just going to surrender onto the mat and allow these vibrations and the convulsions to take place. And I'm listening to the music. That's all I need to do. And it's such an easy fix for so many situations. But I think it gets neglected because maybe sometimes people think, oh, well, it's like too easy. I've got to do something more important than just listen to the music. It's like, no, just listen to the music. It's really all you need to do.
Yeah, I like to think about something that one of my shamans told me during an ayahuasca experience, or beforehand. He just said, imagine there's a string that your your body or your soul or whichever part of us that journeys. Imagine there's like a silver cord that is attached to us as we travel off into multiple dimensions. And he said that. He said, just like attune to where the string goes to and listen for the sounds, listen
Yeah.
for the music. And then once you are able to capture that, let it bring you back, because sometimes people can get like way off.
Yeah.
And that is it's like our guide. So music becomes the guide. Music holds the space. Music is our comfort. And music also can be scary. Like there are certain tones when combined with other tones that can set people off into discomfort. But also, we're not here to spiritually bypass and just be
Yeah.
in the beauty of it all,
Yeah.
although that is a big part of it. Going into those harder states can be facilitated by the music and going into minor chords and seconds instead of being in the beautiful thirds and fifths, like going into strange combinations of sound can help people to kind of access some of those scarier places if they're ready.
Yeah, yeah. That kind of encapsulates sort of my biggest critique of just generic quote new age music, that it tends to promote everything should be peaceful and soothing and relaxing, which is nice. I mean, there's need for that, there's room for that. But I don't like a psychedelic session to be loaded with only peaceful, relaxing music. That, just as you're saying here, that I think that there's a lot of room for a little discordance, a little aggression, a little bit of harshness here and there, so that it gives us the opportunity to then use that input to discover, whoa, where am I reacting that I'm uncomfortable around this sound, that prevents the spiritual bypassing. Because, as we've been talking about, we are human beings, and actually being a human is pretty darn hard, and it's pretty stressful, and we have a big burden of this self-awareness and self-knowledge, and then the ability, again, it's important to relax, to release, to let go, but also to confront the difficult aspects of our experience and not just bypass them. And this is where I like how music in a psychedelic shamanic session kind of uses these different modes and these different states in order to allow the full spectrum of experience to arise, and not just, okay, we're all just going to bliss out for a while, which again, it can be great. I'm not speaking ill of that in general, but if that's all that we're doing with our sound and our altered states, then we're probably missing a lot and not really integrating fully as the full spectrum beings that we are. So I always like that phrase, like, we're full spectrum. It's like
Yeah.
you mentioned experiencing 5-MeO, and this is one that can really confound people, where it has a reputation for these beautiful, blissful, divine experiences. And that's one of the highest potentials of the 5-MeO experience. You're just enveloped in, this is the orgasm of the all, and like, this is awesome. But it can also be incredibly dark and terrifying for people, and it can be very, very difficult, especially if they are unloading long repressed traumas and suppressed energies and things like that. And this is where, in my integration work with people, I always like to remind them, like, we are full spectrum beings. The 5-MeO experience is a full spectrum experience. Psilocybin mushrooms can be a full spectrum experience. Cannabis can be a full spectrum experience, and it's about embracing all of this nature of the self. And as a self-identified radical non-dualist, I always like to say that, look, there's only one universal being in consciousness that's interacting with itself, and I call that God. And so that means all of reality is this one being. So that means the most horrible, horrific, painful, traumatic things is this one being experience in itself. And the most beautiful, blissful, healing, and transformative experiences is also this one being experience in itself. And it's all within this underlying energy of unconditional love, which means it's all permitted, it's all welcomed, because it's all the experience of the one being in itself. So nothing is rejected at that level. And we as humans, we want things to always be good, happy, easy, healthy, pleasurable, but that's just not the reality. So using discordant sounds, using sonic input that might be a little more edgy, helps us reconcile that within ourselves. So I think it has its place within all of these experiences.
Yeah, for sure. And I think part of that is knowing what you are looking for. If you are coming to a psychedelic experience, um, I mean, number one, if you're coming to a psychedelic experience, you're probably wanting to do some sort of healing work or transformative work, right? And inherent is that in that is that we have to often go through dark places
Yeah.
to get to that.
Yeah.
But there are also people who may have trauma and this is a big deal these days that we're talking about it, which is great. And and the shamanic or the psychedelic or the healing experience may need to be just slower, more sensitive, less intense. And so with music, we can slow down and make things less intense and change the sound. And that's partially why live music during
Mm.
psychedelic ceremonies or sessions is so great, because the facilitator is hopefully tuning into the energy field of the people. And yes, there's this feeling of like, oh, somebody's at a really cathartic experience, let's like give them really intense music.
Yeah.
Yes, that can work for some people, but some people, that might not be what they need. They might need to pull back a bit and go a little slower. Like, we don't want to fry people or fry their nervous systems or like send them back into a re-traumatization. So it takes a very sensitive guide and facilitator and potentially psychotherapist or psychedelic psychotherapist to be there and to really sense into what's happening and what type of music might be the most healing or supportive in that moment. And that's why I love the mix of sound therapy. And still, there's a lot of sound therapists who are really just starting. Like, most of the people that you're seeing in yoga studios or in the park, they're probably only just beginning to do this. Like, it's a huge boom that's happening right now, sound healing, and lots of people are coming into it, as probably I may have even said to you, as that's part of this summit. So there's a lot to learn as sound healers. We're not just creating sweet, relaxing spaces. And there's a lot of training that has to go into understanding, well, what if somebody's in my sweet space and I'm only offering the sweet space because I don't know what to do if somebody freaks out? Like, that's dangerous. So there's a lot to learn when it comes to sound healing, and it takes people into altered states the same way that psychedelics do.
Yeah. And it really requires a lot of sensitivity in being open to that energetic feedback from, okay, if I make this sound and somebody responds, does that mean I just make more of it? Or how is it actually impacting them? That it's not a canned thing, right? And it can't just follow a predetermined program, that it has to be responsive in the moment. And that's what makes it most efficacious for people. It's like, with a shaman leading an ayahuasca ceremony, that they might have their set list of like, these are the songs I'm going to sing, but still they're going to be looking at and responding to and feeling into, how are people responding to this? Maybe it's the time to sing this song now. Let's do this ikaro now, or let's bring out this rattle or this sound at this point, so that it has to be something that is openly created in the moment, that brings out the most efficacious experience for people. And it can't be something that the musician is just dominating on. Like, no, I'm going to make these sounds no matter what. Yeah.
That's right.
And that's where you
Yeah.
say it requires training and sensitivity, that it's like performing, but it's also not performing, because it's serving, it's guiding. So there's a very important role that's being played there.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you brought that up, that exact question, because in the Sacred Sound Summit, it's one of the questions that I've asked is, what is the difference between performing or being in this role of the healer? And is there a difference? And what are the components that make it different or the same? And I actually posted this on, there's a Facebook group that I'm part of called Sound Bath Practitioners Worldwide. It has about 70,000 people in it. It's really well moderated. And so there's no spamming or anything, and people are very curious. It's very educational. So I posted that question, and I have like 100 comments right now, and
Wow.
people are saying the most beautiful things. So I love that you spontaneously just said that as well. One of the things that really keeps resonating with me is one man said when he was first doing his training and when he was doing his initial learning, he had been working with a shaman, and the shaman said to him, if you begin every sound healing as a prayer and look at it as being in prayer, then you can't go wrong. So I thought that was really beautiful, that idea of the sound healing experience as something sacred, as something prayerful, that you are in gratitude and in this space to kind of co-create with the people that you're working with, knowing that you're not in charge, you're not, your music is not healing them, that they are going to achieve whatever their intention is in their own way with the help of the medicine, and the music is there to guide and to support and hold space. So, and I think, coming from a position of being in a band like you and I have been, there, it's exciting to think about, like, what is the difference between being a performer and then creating healing music? Well, people actually want to come into a ceremony space and feel really like that they really believe that the shaman is going to do their job, and that
Yeah.
they really trust that the musicians are going to do the right thing. So there is a place of performance, in a sense, like being authentically yourself. How do we show up authentically, and is there some piece of performance in that? And I'm also an artist, so I come at things from, like, the visual presentation is important, like how I dress is important. It's not like it is and it isn't. I want to be there, and I want to show up. I even invite my participants and I say, we're going to meet God, goddess, divine consciousness when we do this ceremony. How do you want to show up?
Yeah.
How do you want to be clean, shaved, hair washed, feeling relaxed? You've eaten, your body feels good, you've dressed in something where you feel like, I'm presenting myself to God right now. And how do I want to do that? So is there some performance in that, or is that just like authenticity, or is that humility? Like, I find this such a fascinating topic.
Yeah. And those are all good questions. And I think the important thing is that there's not one answer to that, right? Because in asking those questions, what you're doing is you're inviting people to find, like, well, what really is meaningful for me? What is the best expression of myself in this idea of meeting with the divine, however I might conceive or experience that in this experience? And how do I want to look? How do I want to feel? What is really me versus what is not really me? Again, everybody's got to answer that question for themselves. Nobody else can answer that for you. So it opens that space to allow that authenticity. And I know that that's a big part of what is being discussed in the summit. So I want to position now to talk more about the different speakers and talk more about the Sacred Sound Summit. But I just want to say, we could probably just keep going all day long because we've got a lot of shared territory and interests here, and we could explore any of these topics in much, much more detail. But we don't need to do it because that's what's happening at the Sacred Sound Summit. So let's talk a little bit more about that. And maybe the first place I'd like to invite you to share a little bit is like creating the roster of individuals. It's a pretty wide spectrum. So how did you go about determining who you were going to invite to participate? And let's just start there. Like, how did you create this lineup?
Yeah, great question. So I'll just go back a little bit. A couple years ago, I ran a summit online. It was really great, and I knew I wanted to do another one. I've recently, in the last year, been offering a program called Sacred Sounds, and it's a program for women. It's online. It helps women to awaken their voice, to step into their authenticity and their confidence in sharing their voice, whether that's as a ceremonial facilitator, as a sound healer, as somebody who serves cacao or other plant medicines. So I had already been really seeped in this idea of sacred sounds and what are sacred sounds. So I've been kind of mulling this through for quite some time. And I just woke up one morning and it was like, oh, the Sacred Sound Summit. Like that's exactly what needs to happen. And as soon as I said that, like I just jumped on it and I put together kind of my wish list. And I started to reach out to people, and all of a sudden other names started popping up. I was doing my research, I was looking online, and I knew I wanted the foundation of the Sacred Sound Summit to be around the sacredness of sound and the kind of the place where sound and altered states come together, the place where science and sound come together, the space where indigenous knowledge and sound came together, where obviously psychedelics come into the mix. So all of these aspects, like the spiritual as well, like Tibetan chanting and, the divine music that people have been singing, like Hildegard von Bingen and her chants and solfeggio tunes or solfeggio tones, the kind of sacredness of sound. And so I just put the word out to all sorts of different people. I would just Google, psychedelics sound, psychedelic music, sacred music. And this really beautiful list of people started coming together, people saying, yes, I really want to do this. I'm really, really interested in this. So, for example, I have one man named Ben Carroll. He used to be in a rock band called Raw, and he's stepped into the world of sound healing. I just loved the fact that he was a Universal recording artist, and he has his own personal story of how he kind of like left that world and was lost for a while, and then was like gifted a sound bowl, and all of a sudden now he's got like 350,000 people on his Instagram who follow him as a sound healer, and he's like this wizard. He's so amazing. So there's people like that. And then I also have a man named Dr. Joe Tafur. You may know who he is. People in the psychedelic world certainly will.
Yeah. He's been on the podcast. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I didn't even know this, but the reason he jumped at it was that he has a new book coming out called Medicine Song. It's the title of his new book. And so he's really interested in how the contemporary modern expression of psychedelic healing and psychedelic psychotherapy is informed by sound and song. So we talked a lot about that. And then I have a wonderful young woman. She's from the Huni Queen people of the Amazon. Her name is Chira. And she's talking about something called the humpaya, and that is a dieta, and it's a dieta with a mockingbird. So again, your people will know what a dieta is. I personally didn't know that people would dieta animals. I knew they would dieta trees, plants, flowers. But did you know they were dieting animals as well?
No, I've never heard of that.
Right? And now they're not eating the bird, but they're working with the spirit of this bird. And they call it a mockingbird because this bird lives in the jungle and will mimic the sounds of other birds and animals. So you can hear a bird, but it's not really that bird. And then you realize it's the mockingbird. So you're dietaing with the bird because you want to take on the qualities of the mockingbird so you can also learn how to sing, open your voice, and harness the sacred sounds of the universe. So we're talking with this young woman named Chira. I have a man who works with crystals and crystalline frequencies, and he talks about how his guides are guiding him in our interview, and he's singing. He's got this like angelic voice, and he talks about his history with how sound healing came into his life. Who else is interesting? Stephen Halpern, who is like a master sound healing musician. He is like basically the inventor of New Age music. He started in 1969 and has something like 55 albums out. So he's got a fascinating story. David Gibson, who maybe you've heard of, apparently he used to be a music producer. He worked with the Doobie Brothers and a bunch of other big names, and now he runs the Globe Sound Healing Institute. So he's talking about how sound healing works physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. I've got other people who are specifically working with sound in like a spiritual aspect. A woman named Rita Harries, she talks about the sounds of the planets and how sound has created these prayer fields in her journeys and in her visions and in her prayers. So we're really going into specific instruments, like talking about how to work with the drum or working with sound bowls, and also the spiritual aspects of it. So I'm a Gemini and I'm an artist and I'm kind of like everywhere, but there is such a powerful thread that moves through this whole group of people, which is it's the spiritual, it's the divine, it's the sacred of sound.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it's a really interesting and diverse collection of different topics and different speakers that are participating in this. So, at the practical level, this is happening over, it's a 4-day event. So, it's starting today, Monday, the 23rd, 24th, 25th, 26th. How much is happening each day? And of course, when people register, you can go to shannonbrownhealingarts.com, and it's Shannon with 2 N's, SANNON, brownhealingarts.com. And there will be a link in the podcast notes, so you don't have to write it down. You can just go to the link and go directly to our webpage, and you can register. But how much is going to be happening each day? And I think you had mentioned if people miss something, there will be opportunities to go back and maybe see things that they weren't able to catch the first time around. But how's it break it down over the course of these 4 days? And you also did mention that there's going to be like a musical opening and like an integration closing. So yeah, tell us a little bit more about the span of the event.
Yeah, sure. It's over 4 days, so it is quite condensed. That's why if you are listening to this now and you've got some time, put your week time, put your things aside and really focus. It's kind of like going to school in a sense. But every day there's 5 speakers that are released, and each one you have 2 days to watch. And just as a hint for anyone here, the final 3 days I will be opening up and we'll be playing all of them for 3 days. So Friday the 27th, Saturday the 28th, and the 29th, you have the potential to take that whole weekend and listen to all of these talks. And I know for me, when I do summits, that's often what I'll do. I'll like tune in during the week a little bit, but on the weekend, I just basically like listen to all of them. I'm going to clean my house and do it. I'm going to like cook and I'm going to listen. I'm going to be driving somewhere listening. So I just put aside that time. So I invite you all to do that. But we do have, 5 speakers every day, and then the opening and closing. And there is a Facebook group. So if you want to jump into the Facebook group, maybe you could put that in the show notes as well. And in the Facebook group, you can post questions. You can say what stood out for you. You can share your own story. It's really an open space for people to meet each other and to connect and to create friendships. I'm all about creating community as well. And just the fact that all these amazing people are coming together, that's how we grow. That's how we create new ways of thinking and being. Even just this between you and I just happened to come across who you were and loved what you're doing and reached out to you. And now I'm on your podcast. So it's just, we're growing our relationships. So that's what you can do with the Sacred Sound Summit.
Yeah, awesome. I always love a little cross-pollination and fertilization, and it's a pleasure to be able to do like mutual interviews. It is always fun. And I was just yeah, like I started out this interview saying that I was just thrilled to be invited to participate in this, that it gave me an opportunity to talk about things that I don't normally get asked about, but as I've said, is very near and dear to me. And I've really enjoyed the conversation that we've had today. Like I said, I think we could probably just kind of keep going, but we want to save some juice for the actual Sacred Sound Summit. But it just sounds like it's an amazing lineup. I'm honored to be a participant in it, and I really hope that the audience listening to this goes and registers and participates in this. It just sounds like there's going to be a lot of really interesting material for anybody who is interested in the relationship between sound and psychedelics, or healing, or transformation, or personal growth and authenticity and personal expression, and all of that stuff that makes us humans, is the messy, beautiful, amazing creatures that we are. And this thing we call sound and music that has been so integral to who we are as a species, as both collectively and as individuals. So I think it's great that you've done this, and just
Oh,
want to
thank
applaud you for
you.
doing the work of putting this whole thing together and making it available for people.
Oh, thanks so much, Martin. It's been really great chatting with you. I have two things that I wanted to share before we wrap
Yeah.
up. One is that I forgot to mention that one of my all-time favorite musicians is Prince.
Mm.
So if there's any other Prince people out there, I love Prince. I know Prince is like one of my spirit guides. He's there all the time whenever I need him, especially with inspirational, support when it comes to music. I actually sang a Prince song in an ayahuasca ceremony once. I just couldn't help myself. It just came out. And the other thing I wanted to share is that you also can purchase the lifetime access to all the interviews. So I know there's a lot of people out there that want to revisit and really sit down and kind of digest some of these talks. So it's $47 if anyone wants to do that. It's a great investment for future listening sessions. So yeah. So thank you so much.
Yeah. And since you gave Prince a shout out, I want to do one of my own, if I may.
Yeah.
So for me, as a young musician, by far the most important band when I was just starting out musically was The Cure. I mean, there's nothing compared to
Ooh.
The Cure for me. So I just want to give out a shout out to The Cure and Robert Smith. I was so thrilled by their latest album. I don't even remember the name of it now. Something about Alone. Typical Cure kind of. I'm just looking on my phone, like, what's the name of the new album? Songs of a Lost World. That's it. Yeah, yeah. Songs of a Lost World. And when
Okay.
they released their first new album in almost a couple decades, and it's if you're a fan of The Cure, oh my God, it's so good. It's so
Wow.
good.
Okay. I'm going to check it out.
Yeah, so that's my musical shout out. They've always been Robert Smith has been like my musical idol in many ways. And I'll just share one of the things I always loved about Robert Smith and The Cure is that he didn't hold himself to anything other than I'm just going to be creative and make music. And so you can listen to their albums and they're just like all over the map musically,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
going from kind of like I was talking about before, the idea of like full spectrum music, everywhere from like goofy to like, oh, the lament and the struggles and the pain and
Yeah.
all of that. But I really love that he didn't confine himself just to one mode and just was really musically creative and expressive. And so anyway, that's my shout out. And I've always enjoyed Prince. I don't think I've ever owned a Prince album, but I own all the Cure albums, even the ones I don't like. There's a couple of them that are just like, not so great.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's my shout out,
That's so
Robert.
cool. And it feels like there's something that's just that deeply resonates with who you are
Yeah.
when you resonate with a musician like that. So I also feel that same way about Prince. And I think probably because when I was really young, I remember seeing him on this show called Solid Gold. I don't know if you remember that, but
Mm-hmm.
it was like New
Yeah.
Year's Eve on Solid Gold, and I'd never heard of Prince before. And all of a sudden, I was riveted. It was like, what is this
Yeah.
music? Oh
Yeah.
my God, my life changed. I would never be the same after listening to that music. So, shout out to music. Woo! Shout out to all the musicians out there and the healers that are bringing music into the world. I bow to you and honor you and thank you.
All right. Well, it's been a great conversation, Shannon. Just one last reminder, the Sacred Sound Summit is happening today. It's happening now. You can register and participate as you are available. And as you mentioned, you can buy the package to get unlimited access to all of the talks and conversations and presentations. But I think it's going to be a great event. And again, thank you for bringing me in as a participant and as a presenter, Shannon. And it's been a pleasure having you here on the Entheogenic Evolution podcast.
It's been great to meet you. Thank you so much for being part of it. And till we meet again.
All right.
Bye-bye.